Hello, everyone. So I'm Deborah Ramsdell. I have been in the biotech industry for many, many years, and my specialty is building strategic plans for developing early stage programs and taking them into and through clinical trials. For the last 15 years, I've been working primarily on rare diseases and have actually, I think Alex said this in his talk, I met Alex and Mark D'Souza back in 2008 when we were looking at a protein replacement therapy for this horrible disease called dystrophic epidermolysis bullosa. And fast forward, we're still working together to develop therapies for this disease. So am I supposed to show my own slides, or Marty, are you doing this?
Yes, that's best, yes.
What, for me too?
Yes, it's best if you show your slides, yes.
Okay. Hold on. Just have to pull them up. I just had it out. Give me 1 second. I speak fast, so.
Take your time. Great. Can everyone see? Can you see them? Looks good.
Okay, great. So, so Phoenicis is, as Alex said, a company that was formed to look for therapies primarily for dystrophic epidermolysis bullosa. But one of the products that we're working on is a protein called human recombinant decorin. And decorin is special. Decorin is a protein that it's an anti-fibrotic protein. In other words, it helps the body manage scarring, wound healing and scarring. So this particular product, we looked at a lot of fibrotic diseases. We've been in the preclinical arena with over 200 publications in multiple fibroses. But what we decided to do is we decided to look at dystrophic epidermolysis bullosa first. We know the disease best. We've been working on it for a lot of years. We've been involved in most of the programs. And we believe this is a disease where we can really see a difference in patients. And it's a rare disease, so it can be small clinical trials, very directly run, and we'll talk about that later. So we've currently raised $10.5 million under a $15 million convertible note. All of the investors thus far in the company have been DEB foundations and high net worth individuals, friends, and family. We also have applied for multiple grants. We received a $3 million grant from the Department of Defense, and that helped to fund the manufacturing of Decorin, as well as all of the preclinical animal studies that are required to get into the clinic. And we have just applied recently last year for 2 additional grants to support a phase 2 clinical trial in DEB. And we'll talk about that as well. Decorin is a platform, and it can treat, as I said, many other different types of fibrotic diseases. And our team has been together for a long time. What's special about us is that we know all of the KOLs, we know all of the clinicians, we know the foundations, we know the families worldwide in multiple countries. This isn't just US, it's not just US and EU. We know people all over the world who are involved in working on this disease and people who have this disease. And what we're seeking is $4.5 million to fill out a convertible note round and to get Decorin through the phase 2 clinical trial in EB, which will be on top of one or more of the grants that we've applied for. Okay. This is our team. You've already met Alex Silver and you've already met Mark D'Souza. Hal Landy is our chief medical officer. Hal's been involved in many rare disease programs throughout his career, has gotten multiple drugs on the market successfully. So we have a good, solid, very experienced team that we work with. And as I said, we've worked together since 2008 through many companies, but a lot of our focus has been on DEB or rare genetic diseases. So Decorin, what is Decorin? Decorin is a protein that's naturally expressed in many, many tissues throughout the body. And what it does, it's really simple. It controls wound healing so that once the wound is healed, the process doesn't continue to scarring. Okay, and that's called exaggerated tissue repair. So Decorin can also reverse scarring. It actually acts on multiple TGF betas and biomarkers in the body. So it can literally tell the wound, you're done now, you can stop, you don't need to go any further. And we've shown that in, as I said, over 200 publications that show that it can slow inflammation, halt progression, and reverse fibrosis in the eye, the skin, the lung, the liver, the kidney, and the central nervous system. This happens to be something that's really important because what's DEB? Well, DEB, dystrophic epidermolysis bullosa, is defined as a rare skin disorder. But the reality is that every single organ system is affected by this disease. And I'll tell you that I have worked in everything. I've worked in many, 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 many diseases, pediatric diseases, adult diseases. And when I heard about DEB, I was really nervous about meeting the patients because I felt like this is just so visibly horrible that it's really tough to look at these patients, to talk to these patients, to watch them move. And it affects every aspect of their life. It's one of the diseases that is a 24/7, 365 care-taking disease for parents, for the patients, for families, for caregivers. It's has a huge impact on family life. It has a huge impact, as Alex said, on the medical system. You know, he basically said $1 million a year is what it costs the healthcare system to take care of these patients. That's between bandage changes, cost of bandaging, hospitalizations for infections, dilatation surgeries. We'll talk about that a little bit. Corneal abrasions. This affects the eye. Patients have, they close their eyes and they scratch their cornea. Oral and esophageal blistering. So what happens is there's scarring that occurs in the esophagus and also in the anus. And every so often, some more frequently than others, these patients have to actually go through a dilatation. So they get a balloon put into their esophagus to break open the scars so that they can continue to eat. So, and also that means that they're not getting the nutrition that they need. So it's a very bad cycle that these patients get into. Infections, open wounds are constantly infected. This mitten deformity is scarring that happens on the hands and feet. And the scarring is so severe that it forms this coating over the hands and the feet. And the only thing that can be done is they have to be surgically separated. So typically they'll separate the thumb from the rest of the hand so that patients get some movement, and then it closes back up again. Oral and dental problems because their mouths close. They can't open their mouths completely. So one product, Crystal's Vyjuvik, was just approved last year as a topical gene therapy. It is limited to 3 credit card size wounds at a time that can be treated. It's a gene therapy. First product out though, which really gives the rest of us a pathway to approval. And so what it's not serving are the systemic issues. The reason that we became interested in Decorin is because of this study. This is an Italian study that was done in 2014 with a pair of identical twins. These men, both left and right, have exactly the same mutation for DEB. And they grew up the same way with each other, but this twin on the left has about half of the Decorin that the twin on the right has. And you can see that their phenotype is very different. I mean, the guy on the right only has a little bit of scarring on his elbow and his hands, whereas the twin on the left has a ton of scarring. So what we said was, well, these data suggest that if we gave Decorin intravenously, we could actually reduce scarring in DEB or or also prevent scarring and treat all of the systemic manifestations, because Decorin is going to go everywhere in these patients. Further, what our collaborators in Freiburg, Germany did was they studied a mouse model of DEB, and they used a lentiviral vector. So they gave the mouse gene therapy that contained Decorin. And what you see is that these mice develop the same mitten deformities that the patients have. But if you treat them with Decorin, those mitten deformities don't develop, and their survival estimates are higher than the mice that were not treated. So these are two, data sets that show that we're on the right track here with Decorin. Where we are today, we're ready for an IND. We have manufactured GMP grade, which is, the clinical grade Decorin at Catalent Pharma Solutions. And it's formulated. All we have to do essentially is fill it into vials and label it. Our IND enabling animal tox studies were paid for by the Department of Defense, and they're done. And our clinical protocol is written and ready to execute. We'll talk about that in a second. We also have applied for 2 grants to support this phase 2 study. LifeArc is a UK scientific research organization that's a charity organization. It was funded originally by the Medical Research Council and uses its investment portfolio to support the charitable activities. We were actually requested to file for a grant from LifeArc. So we submitted that grant in early December, and we're hoping to hear from them by April of this year, whether or not we got the grant, and that's for $1.2 million. We also, at the same time, applied through Alex's EB Research Partnership Foundation, and he's not associated with them anymore, but we applied for a $1.2 million grant from them as well, and we're expecting to hear that either this month or next month. So the competitive landscape of disease-modifying therapies for DEB, in the competition, there is Crystal Biotech, which I already talked about, which is on the market. It is not a systemic treatment. It is not disease modifying. It heals wounds when it treats those wounds. Market cap for Crystal is $3.3 billion today. Abeona Therapeutics just filed their BLA for review for approval. They create these sheets. What they do is they take the skin from a DEB patient, they correct the cells in the skin to produce normal collagen 7, and they create sheets of these cells. And then they graft the sheets onto larger wounds on the body. Again, not a systemic therapy, but a solid therapy. And they probably will be approved sometime the first half of this year, and they'll be on the market as well. So we are the third company, but the only company right now that's clinic ready and is able potentially to have a systemic effect on this disease. So in summary, we're IND ready for DEB. Our clinical trial is going to take place in the UK because there are 2 investigators in the UK that are essentially affiliated with LifeArc that really want to run this study. And what they're going to do is measure esophageal dilatations, swallowing, corneal abrasions, all of those systemic things that I talked about earlier. We're looking at this point to treat 6 patients, and we'd like to treat more patients. So the more money we bring in, the better we'll be able to fund a phase 2 study that would actually be more robust and potentially be a pivotal trial for this disease, because we know what we need to do from an outcomes perspective to treat these patients. And then the upside from this is that, so we're seeking 4.5 million under a convertible note round to complement the grant funding for this clinical trial. And the terms of the note would be a 7% interest rate, conversion into preferred stock, and a Series A financing at a lower of either 20% of the Series A valuation or a 40 million valuation cap, which is where the rest of the convertible note people came in at.
Deborah, how much have you raised so far?
10.5 million.
And have you had any grants?
Yes, we've had a DoD.
What's the total?
3 million from a DoD grant, Department of Defense.
So 3 million non-dilutive. Okay, got it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. They're all non-dilutive.
What was the post? What was the post money?
Pardon?
What was the post money on the last raise?
40 million, 20% discount.
No, that's the next raise. What was the post money the last time?
That was also the last raise.
Same
yeah.
thing? Okay, Bob. Yep, 40 million.
Yep. So
we have a couple of questions here.
Sure, go ahead.
Somebody asked a question here. Matt Kessler's asking a question. I'll repeat your question.
Thank you.
Was on Lloyd Austin, chief of staff, and prostate cancer testing. How better is it getting?
Any thoughts on Lloyd Austin, chief of staff, prostate cancer testing?
No thoughts on that.
No thoughts. Okay. Because I'm not sure, what's the relationship to Decorin?
Well, it's just that, he was just diagnosed and treated. I thought maybe there would be some type of either connection or some type of testing that's an offshoot of it. I was just thinking, okay, is there any, prognosis or better testing coming?
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think we had a testing company up here earlier, but it's not for this subject matter, but I think it's interesting. So
I do too. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Prostate's a funny cancer. It can be either, very treatable or it's aggressive. It doesn't have a whole
exactly
lot.
Right. If you're the very aggressive type, you have to get treated right away. Other types, you can stay with it for 10 or 20 years or 30 years.
Exactly.
Die with it rather than of it.
Right. Exactly right. Once you get past a certain age, right? Keep on going.
I found it kind of interesting that he didn't tell people. I thought that was a little odd, but So anyway, any other questions?
So I think I understand where you're at. Keep on going.
Okay, so anyway, that's all. So basically the last slide is that Decorin can be formulated to specifically target different tissues. So DED is
I mean, my question, can you go back to the slide with the twins?
Sure.
So this is like this is an inherited disease, or how do you get this disease?
Yes, it's a genetically inherited disease.
So this scarring is just caused by you wake up of it one day?
Yes, it's caused by the fact that the skin just blisters and peels and blisters and peels and heals. So it blisters, it peels off, and then it heals. And as it heals, it causes scarring because the scars literally land on top of themselves. So you can have sections of the body that just constantly scar and heal. I mean, blister and heal.
Are all of these blistering and healing diseases related, or they can all have different causes?
They're all different causes. Yeah.
So it's not related to some kind of like a pox or one of those, what's the one they make all the adults, shingles? Not related at all.
Yeah, no, this is
totally unrelated. Wow.
This is specific to collagen 7. You know how we have fillers, collagen fillers and things like that? I'm gonna stop my share.
Sure.
Collagen, there are tons of collagens in the body, okay? And what's interesting is each collagen has its own little job. Collagen 7's job is to glue the epidermis to the dermis. So if you're missing it, your epidermis just sloughs off, literally. And that's what
Is there an application to lupus?
No.
And how rare is this?
It's ultra rare. There are something like, well, it depends. For both the dominant and the recessive, there are about 10,000 patients in the US and 15 or so in Europe.
Wow.
Yep.
What does a treatment cost typically for something like this?
Upwards of $1 million a year. And that includes bandaging. They have special bandages that are lined with, with antimicrobial layers. Those bandages have to get changed every day or two. So literally you've got these kids, remember the pictures of the patients, there was one child that was completely wrapped like a mummy. So parents put their children in a salt bath and they take the bandages off every day to open up the wounds and clean them, and then they rebandage them again. That's why I said it's 24/7 every day.
Is this an ongoing disease or does it have outbreaks?
No, it's ongoing. It doesn't really have outbreaks, not that I've seen and not that the natural history shows. In fact, patients just get worse and worse and worse because what happens is as that wounding and healing and scarring continues. You have things like contractures in behind your knee, your skin, so they can't walk. You have the mitten deformities in the hands. So it's either rapidly or moderately progressive disease, depending on, what type you have, whether it's, super aggressive or moderately aggressive, but it's aggressive. And frankly, most of the patients die of squamous cell carcinoma because of
because it's an orphan drug. Do you have any kind of accelerated approach towards it, or?
We will. Yeah, we'll apply for that once we open the clinical trial. Yeah, we'll get.
Paul, you have another question, Paul?
We have orphan, but we'll get like fast track, and we'll get.
It seemed to me that people would despair and take their own lives.
A lot of these things, yeah.
Well, so I'll tell you a story. So the very first patient I met was a 13-year-old girl out in Cincinnati. We went to visit the site because we wanted to do a clinical trial out there. This was with another product. And the investigator, the clinician, said to me, would you mind going and sitting with her in the room? I want to talk to her mother. And I said, sure. She was covered with bandages. She had one spot on her leg. This is a 13-year-old girl who should start, having crushes on boys, right? One spot on her leg that didn't have wounds on it. And we were talking, and I was asking her stuff, and she wouldn't look at me, but we had a little conversation. And then I left the room, and Dr. Lucky said to me, thank you for doing that. There was a Facebook suicide page that I just found out about, and I wanted to warn her mom about it.
Well, Marty, this is Norm. I had a conversation with Deborah yesterday about the other possibilities for this therapeutic, and that's in the ophthalmic space, which takes the rareness of a disease to a much broader population. And I think Deborah, in one of the slides, had a pyramid, which I think showed some of the ophthalmic applications. But for mission funders, this could be a really interesting way of getting into a disease solution that could have very broad applications and potentially significant financial upside. So there's going to be more about that Deborah and Alex and Mark are going to be developing. But the ophthalmic area is not trivial at all.
Right. And one of the things that's great about this clinical trial in the DEB patients is that, with corneal abrasions being part of the phenotype of the disease, part of the pathology, we will be able to look at that in these patients and look for improvements. And we've seen that with other therapies, so we know that it can happen. And I think that would be a great, but we also have Dr. Robert Scott from Birmingham, UK, who's one of our key advisors, and he's developed a couple of protocols already for different indications in ophthalmology. And I would love to talk about that more with everyone.
One more question.
13-year-old at Cincinnati Children's Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
The 13-year-old at Cincinnati Children's Hospital?
Yes.
And the doctor's name you mentioned?
Ann Lucky, Lucky. Dr. Lucky is one of the premier clinicians in dystrophic epidermolysis bullosa. And I've been working with her since 2008.
Well, this is fascinating. So, we know what the ask is, and this is really great. So, Deborah, thanks so much for educating us.
Thank you so much, everyone. It was a real honor to be here.